And welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Plek, and joining me in studio is none other than Muhammad Ali, pastor of our students and associate pastor here at Wells Branch Community Church. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm awesome. And Pastor Holland, lead pastor there at Eastside Community Church that's on the east side of Austin.
Very true. That is where it is. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. Glad to have you. How is the east side? Is it still there?
Still there. God's doing great things.
It's awesome.
Wonderful things.
Well, now we had this past week. What did you guys preach there at Eastside?
We just started a series in the book of Haggai.
Wow.
Short series, vision series. Going to spend a couple weeks covering Haggai.
Did you tell them to stop working on their houses and start working on the church?
Essentially.
That's good. That's good.
Got to get your priorities straight.
Right.
Work on your house, but do the Lord's work first.
Lord's work first. I appreciate that. Now, we're in the Song of Solomon, which we had to tell all the parents to make sure they were ready for this. And a lot more, our children's ministry was at its highest level in a long, long time. So there were a lot of us that were not ready for that conversation and a lot that just jumped into it and said, let's go. And I really appreciated that. So we're talking about sex. We're talking about the Song of Solomon. We're talking about marriage. And Song of Solomon starts off with, and this is my view on this, which is kind of fun. When we start off with, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Your anointing oils are fragrant. Your name is oil poured out. Therefore, virgins love you. Draw me after you. Let us run. The king has brought me into his chambers. To me, I took that as it was the wedding night, and she's remembering the wedding night and is excited about it before she does a flashback to prior to the wedding night. My view. Any thoughts on, what was your view on those first four verses?
Yeah, agree.
Oh, cool. And because you preached this to your church
Maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, he's already done all that.
And we preached through it at the young adult group like 10 years ago, I think. Way back in the day here at Wells Branch.
That's right.
So,
so a lot of people have different takes on the Song of Solomon.
mm-hmm.
There is the allegory take, which has been, honestly, Christian tradition for about 1,800 years was allegory. It was either, or even before that, let's just go 5,000 years. It was Yahweh's covenantal love with Israel. And then when Christians came along, it was Christ's covenantal love with the church. Some Middle Age mystics where it was like Christ's love with the individual. And then back to the reformers who went Christ's love for the church. And so everybody, for the most part, kind of kept that as an allegory. And then till some, really the last 200 years, Bible scholars go like, man, it's tough to sell the two breasts as being the Old and New Testament or like some allegorical view only. And I think so there's allegory, there's a literal view of the Song of Solomon that is just strictly a God's delight in the sexual experience of a husband and a wife and him cheering it on as his design. And then the one I've really grown to appreciate is the typological view of where it is, you're looking at Christ's love for his church or covenantal love of God and for his people. And then also a love between a man and a woman that God made, designed, and how sex is to be enjoyed as something that was made for pleasure, not simply only for procreation. Procreation is probably a primary, but a huge part of God's design for sex was that we would enjoy it. And so I think that's part of his, obviously, design. Mo, have you heard any other views on that or any other sort of ways to approach the Song of Solomon?
I don't think so.
Yeah, those are pretty much it.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I kind of went from on this is that there's a couple things to look at is a husband quality or some spousal qualities. But first, the husband quality was having a good name and then pursuing a woman who wanted the same.
Yeah.
How, like, when you just thinking back to Lauren,
yeah,
like talk to me about like your, because you were in a young adult ministry in California, and talk to me about like that perspective of being a person that was had really, because you were like pastoring really, or at least teaching and doing young adult ministry back then when you met Lauren.
Yeah.
So talk to us about like the good name aspect for you and how that played into it.
Man, it was kind of wild because I was the pastor of the ministry, and I started that right when COVID hit, and it was pretty wild because I was pretty like, hey, well, Santa Clara County's restriction for COVID was you can have up to 250 people at a gathering as long as it was an outdoor space.
Huh.
And I figured, man, this is a tough transition. Ain't nobody going to show up. And we went from 30 people to about 180 people in about 4 months.
Wow.
And sure, like the preaching and the worship was it's a bunch of people in their early 20s that were alone.
Yeah, starving.
That were starving for community. So I give all of the credit to the ability in the people in our community to be able to forge friendships. And that was happening.
Yeah.
And then Lauren comes in, and I already have like friendships with some of the people there for like years.
Yeah.
And so I really like the fact that you talked about here in the text where it says the others. And so like you're having this not isolated and like, oh, who's your girlfriend, by the way? And whatever. It's like everybody knows everybody. When you're hanging out, you're all together.
Right.
And so you're getting to know somebody, yes, in the context like individually, but you're getting to know somebody in the context of like, how do they talk to other people?
Yeah.
Right. How are they around not just me, but around everyone else?
Right.
And so to me, like having experienced that of, yes, one, I mean, obviously, like as a pastor, you have to be careful in pursuing a woman within your ministry, right? So that's what I was really, really careful about.
Hard. Yep.
But as soon as I recognized, like, oh man, she's great, she loves the Lord, she whatever, like I went for it. And in my mind, as soon as I did, I was like, I want to marry you.
Yeah.
Right. And by God's grace, it all worked out. But yeah, so like pursuing and having, to me, like good friends.
Yeah.
Because to me, if you don't know how to have friends, you don't have any business trying to pursue someone.
Right.
You don't even know how to hold a friendship.
Right.
Right. And how much more is a marriage? So that's kind of how it was.
I like the way you put that.
Speaking about that, I was just like, yes.
Yeah.
And I love how you brought out kind of like the thing that you had with Adrian.
Yeah.
Where y'all were running, and she's just like,
I'm out.
Or like, let's define the relationship type of thing. And if you're going to pursue me.
Yeah.
That's bold. Dude.
She was bold.
Yeah.
I mean, well, obviously.
Yeah.
If you know Adrian for more than 3 seconds, that honestly was the thing that was like, I have never heard a woman be that bold and that confident and that awesome. And I was like, okay, and when she's like, I want to marry my best friend, I was like, oh, duh. Anyway, Adrian is like the ultimate win for me, obviously. Holland, I still remember the trip. There was the California trip where you and Jenny started to connect because she went back and forth with you on the van.
That's right.
Yeah.
At your command.
That's right. That was me kind of, well, we did have Adrian and I did have a talk about it because Adrian connected with Jenny in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we went to California, Adrian had mentioned like, I think Holland and Jenny would be a thing. I was like, okay, Jenny, you have to go with Holland back and forth, driving everybody
That's right.
to the airport.
Y'all
and
were playing Cupid. And it worked out.
It did. I think there's something to that. Like, meaning, I don't want to say a pastor's role is to play Cupid, but sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because we want to see godly people flourish.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you see someone you really love and respect and are awesome, like you're wanting to connect them and bring them together. So you guys spent like 20 hours together. Just, I think all you guys did was drive people back and forth from the airport.
Yeah. Did a lot of driving together. And, and then like when I had realized like, man, I think I love this girl. I want to marry her. I remember I called you and I was like, what should I do? And you were like, well, have you told her yet? And I was like, no. And you were like, you should tell her. And so I was like, all right. So then the next day I did. We were on our way to church and I told her in the car on the way to church, we were like listening to a worship song and like having a great deep conversation. I told her, I love you. And her response was like, I think it was, that's sweet.
No. No.
And then, proceeded to like the most awkward church service just sitting next to each other in church the whole time. I'm just like, what am I thinking? What did I do wrong? Why did I say it right then? Anyway, she later said it back, and we had a good talk. But
Yeah.
it was just kind of put her on the spot right there on the way to church.
She was not prepared. Yeah, that was good. Wow, way to go.
Yeah.
And then, I remember when you got married. That was back in 2012, right?
2012. Yep.
Yeah.
Dang, bro.
That was wild. That was some good times. That wedding was great right there at Zilker Botanical Gardens.
Correct.
Yeah, that was
Dang.
good stuff. Well, okay, so let's talk about the one line that I stole from Tommy Nelson from his Song of Solomon series, which I love Tommy Nelson and I love his preaching on the Song of Solomon, but and I don't want to take anything away from his preaching on the Song of Solomon. However, I felt like he preached whatever he wanted and just used the Song of Solomon in passing. But but one thing he did say, it was like the right truth, just not from the right text. Anyway, but the one thing I did love about what he said in that series was he said, run towards Christ and then look to your left and to your right and see who's running with you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably someone that you should marry or would be the one that would be good to do life with. And I really appreciated that. And so for me, I kind of had that gear. If someone could, especially when we were doing ministry like we were back in the old days, of just running and gunning, traveling all over the country, sharing the gospel, doing insane stuff with evangelism, mission work. Adrian was able to hang with that, and she was fun and always made it fun. And so that for me was like, I want to find someone who's pursuing Jesus in the same intensity, I guess is the right way, as I am. And I think that's a huge win for obviously a couple, because sometimes I think a lot of people get married and you have either the guy sort of dragging the girl, which is actually probably preferable, or what happens a lot of times is the girl's dragging the guy, which is not quite as preferable. Like, come on, let's go run for Jesus. And he's like, no, I'm good with just going to church every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
And it's again, I get it. People are at different spots and different spaces, but man, why not start from a place of running towards Christ? And you find that, I think this is the hard thing that people have is they don't know where to find Christians. And I'm like, if you just serve in the local church, like even in small churches, like you're going to find somebody's going to be there that will be a person that you would want to marry. Because anyway, I think sometimes we just sort of abandon that. We go to Hinge or we go to whatever.
Yeah. And I will say it's hard. At least it was for me, like dating before I met Lauren. Yeah. And I mean, I was at a big church. Yeah. A big Bible believing church. And then like before that, I was I was going to another whatever. Yeah. And it's crazy how many girls I met and dated that just had like crazy beliefs. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like these are girls that I'm meeting in Christian young adults groups. Right. Right. And then I'll just ask like simple, basic lead up questions. And they're just like, oh yeah, like, I don't know if the Holy Spirit's God. He's probably more like a feeling. And I'm just like, what? You know? And it's like, they're 20, they've never been taught, but still it's like, well, yo, time after time, you know? So it's tough, you know? I can still, I see why people will be like, man, I've tried dating and it's hard to find a Bible believing girl or guy or whatever. But yeah, it's the role of the local church to train them up, right? Right. To have our young adults be like ready for marriage. Right.
And I think that's a struggle overall is that sometimes the lost years is the young adult years, or the single again years where there's not a place, you don't feel like there's a place for you. Yeah. And I think that's where you've got to be super intentional with your time to engage the church. If they don't have something specific for like a young adult ministry, so to speak. Right. Anyway, I think that's a challenge. I think that was one of the cool things that when we came here, Holland led our young adult ministry, and it was really fun. And a lot of people got married at our church from that. Yeah, did a lot of weddings out of that. Yeah, it was great. Okay, let's go. One of the things that all still together. Yeah, praise the Lord.
Praise God. That's a great caveat. Yeah.
I'm like, it's a pretty good record.
And still in church.
Yeah, that is good for the most part.
For the most part, you know, the ones I officiated.
Okay, yeah. Like, are you still like 100% on all the people you've married?
100% so far.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about you, Chris?
God's
No.
grace. That doesn't. I mean, you don't. It's not like there's some special way to do a ceremony that
You know, you
ensures-
like listen,
Yeah.
man.
But I'm just more thankful that
I won't go into who it was, but I remember there was this picture of me, and it wasn't reflective, I don't think, but it was prophetic. It wasn't reflective about how I felt about the couple at the time. But there's this it was one of our elders took a picture of me after the wedding was over, and I was like
No.
and it was kind of like I think it was probably more like it was a long week, and I was tired. I was just like, I'm glad that's over with. But like there they are, like kissing, and I'm like, and prophetically they didn't make it. Anyway,
Wow,
yeah, it was like kind of sad. Anyway,
that was very sad.
yeah, it is very sad. And I was like, what is the secret sauce of? And there was a lot of marriage counseling that went into just trying to save that one.
Yeah.
But like I think that's what happens is like you have people that aren't running as hard as they can, or they have kind of where you were going, Mo, maybe a misdirected. They haven't gotten a lot of their theology fixed.
Yeah.
Before they get married, and they're
Yeah.
expecting
Yeah.
a lot of, I don't know, issues to just go away.
Yes.
Issues to never come up, or an
Yeah.
expectation of what marriage is going to do for me.
Yeah.
As opposed to I'm getting into this to serve my spouse, and it's going to be a grind and a hard work, and I've got to have the heart of, I know in theory that I'm really selfish, and when that reality hits me, I'm going to have to work to be refined by Christ.
Yeah.
I think that for me was probably the reality that hit the hardest is I don't think I realized how selfish I was until I got married. And Adrian was really good at helping pointing it out.
Nice.
She would say stuff like, she would say, I think sometimes you think that I like should be like just jumping like a gazelle in the fields of how happy it is that I got to marry you.
Yeah.
But the reality is you should be doing that about how you get to be married to me.
There you go.
And I was like, am I really like that? Yeah, I think I probably am. I probably should change. But she was the only one in my entire life that ever sort of like called out my selfishness, called out like she was able to do it in a really funny way.
Yeah.
But also in a loving way, which is sort of a wild, she has a really cool way of doing that.
Yeah.
But I think that's what's hard is that you have expectations, what marriage should be, marriage is going to be. And I think my big challenge is get married, for people, get married younger. I got married later at 34, and I had a lot of habits, a lot of, kind of like selfishness sort of like ingrained that I didn't even realize I had. And I was so grateful that Adrian was able to help undo a lot of that because she was really grounded in who she is. Like, I think the one thing about Adrian is, obviously she's refined over time and is way more graceful, but she's kind of who she is now is kind of who she was then. Very, very direct. And anyway, exactly what I need. I think that's how God designs marriage. I'm super grateful for that. But for you guys, what would you say, like, was there something about your own selfishness that came out after you got married, or you didn't realize that you had?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you are used to just being responsible for yourself, you can get this delusion that you're a lot more mature than you really are.
Right,
then when you move in with someone who notices things about you that you've learned how to excuse or justify over the years. I think that was for me. Like I remember after getting married and like little things here and there that started to add up and stuff as in our first year of marriage, add up. It just led to frustrations and arguments and things like that. It was things that I realized I had learned, like, I don't really have discipline or self-control over this area. I've just learned how to excuse it and justify it for myself. And so,
yeah, that's true.
And then,
oh man, yeah.
Now I have another person, saying like, why do you do this or what? And so I don't know. That first year was very eye-opening for me, but good. Like we had a great first year of marriage in a lot of ways.
And I think Adrian assumed a lot better of me in many ways. Yeah. And just now she's realizing that I have a lot of insecurities that I didn't realize I had, and she's able to point them out, which is really healthy. That's the gift that keeps on giving, is that she's able to help grow me in many ways, to point out and be a great helper to point out all my failings. But no, but in a serious way, actually is very helpful. And I've grown a ton. But what about this? Let's go back to what we were talking about earlier about godly community affirming the right relationship opportunity. I did steal your godly community will affirm the right relationship community opportunity.
Okay, good. Yeah.
It didn't.
Your first point, your first draft didn't rhyme. And so I felt like I needed to help out with that.
Help out. So I appreciate that.
And then ChatGPT sealed it.
Yeah. ChatGPT came around.
Good.
But yeah, let's talk about godly community. Like let's just talk young adults just for a second, because I feel like this is where this goes. Yeah. How are young adults supposed to be in community and have their relationship affirmed? Like, how is that supposed to happen?
I feel like, one of the healthiest ways that I've seen it done is that the young adults community comes out of the high school ministry. And so it's even younger than that, right? And so that you have a guy and a girl who are whatever, like their sophomore, junior, senior year of high school. And then they go into whatever, and then the young adults community. And then from there, so that's like that's an awesome way. You know what I mean? It continues into young adults community. But if you don't have that previously and you meet at young adults, man, that is obviously amazing as well. But yeah, to me, it's like you're just hanging out as a group. Yeah. Right. And you're able to like see, and somebody's able to call certain things that you might not be able to see or call out or whatever. And I love this. That's the thing that you said, if like, or somebody that's maybe even older or more mature in the faith, and they're asking you about your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whatever. It's like, oh, have you noticed the way that they whatever, right?
The same pattern that you can have with yourself that I was bringing up about how you excuse and justify your own shortcomings that a spouse will maybe expose. You can do that for, someone you're dating as well. You learn to just go, well, I'm going to excuse that or justify that. Well, he's not really that into church, but he's really great at these other things. Right. But when community steps in, they go, what do you mean he's, not very committed to church? Like, why not? What's going on there? And so being able to have, like, the others in this poem, in the Song of Solomon, is bringing in the community aspect of other people who are saying, we will exult and rejoice in you. Rightly do they love you. So there are people who are affirming, who are saying, yep, your desire for this person makes sense. This is a godly person. We see it too. It's not just you. So yeah, I think that's friends, church friends. I think parents are a part of that. If you have godly Christian parents, and then mentors, maybe like spiritual parents in a sense, like godly older men and women. So like, you were like that for Jenny and I, being able to bring you in and be like, do you see what I see? Is this right? And that's when you had sat Jenny down in your apartment and put the lamp on her.
Oh man, it was terrible.
Grilled her.
Put a big spotlight on her, and James Meyer and I go, what do you really want with Holland? And she was like,
she stuck around through, but like everything we did together when we were dating, it was with friends. It was in community. We were, I was getting to know her friends. She was getting to know mine. There was, I think, the whole like secret boyfriend, like this, I'm dating this guy, but no, I haven't brought him around church, and no, my parents don't know him, and no, that's just one of the unhealthiest.
Absolutely.
Bad pattern.
I think that I get excited about relationships that flourish in the church, and and you can kind of, and I think there's like, I think we all want that, but what are the reasons why people, let's go back to that hiding aspect, because I do feel like there's times where young adults, they'll fall off the map. Yeah. They're on fire serving, they meet a girl, and then they like disappear. They show up to church once a month or once every now and then. What is that? Is it, I'm afraid they're going to say no? I'm afraid they're going to find out about my sexual sin? What is the or combo, I'm sure, but what do you think it is primarily?
When we were doing young adult ministry here, a lot of this happened all the time, and it was usually that, there was sexual sin that brought about guilt, shame, fear of people finding out, fear of people judging, and so I'm just going to disappear on my church community. And there were some couples though who took a different approach and said, okay, we did sin in this way, but we want to be accountable, we want to repent, and those couples ended up doing really well. Those were some of the marriages we saw. Some of the ones that disappeared because of relationship stuff and sexual sin are not in the church at all anymore.
Right. And that's that's sad, but it's
So-
ultimately, I think the way that you start is probably going to be the way that you finish.
Yeah.
And sometimes church was just this is just a way that I can meet
Meet
someone
people, yeah.
more than this is something that I'm really passionate about.
Right.
I come to a Tuesday. We definitely had guys and girls who would show up Tuesday nights,
Yep.
not because they love the Lord and couldn't wait to hear what I was preaching on that
Yep.
night.
Right.
But they just wanted to meet somebody, and when they did, they were gone after
Yeah,
that.
let's talk about that for a second. Is that a negative thing? Like, because I think there's like, I mean, obviously, a person coming just to look for a dude, although find a godly wife or godly spouse is good, but I think it's important to discern. Like, just because they're at church doesn't make them a Christian.
No.
Just in
Right.
the same way, just because they're in a garage doesn't make them a car.
Yep.
And so I think you don't just like classic, right? So I think we can't turn off our brains in terms of. I do think you have higher odds of finding a Christian person in a church rather than a
Yeah.
bar,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing to search. At
Yeah.
the same time,
No, I loved that people would meet,
Yeah.
and go and date and get in relationships at our Tuesday night young adult thing. I loved that. What I was talking about was people who were faking a
Yeah.
passion for Jesus
Mm.
just to find a
did you
relationship.
Wow.
find people would fake a passion for
Yep.
Jesus?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. I mean, how
Oh,
how could you spot someone faking a passion for Jesus?
I don't think you can look at
That's the
someone
thing.
and tell, but you can watch patterns.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so the pattern was I would come Tuesday night, not necessarily Sunday morning, so just Tuesday nights.
Yep.
And I would come as long as I see a potential of meeting someone here.
Yep.
And then what happened is when they got into a relationship, they would disappear again.
Mm.
No Tuesday nights, no Sunday mornings, no community group, no texting back. And so I don't know, we saw that fairly often.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay, so here's one that I thought was interesting. One of the last things I said is like, love should glow, not feel like whoa. And what I meant was like, I feel like there's a lot of couples that are dating and they're grinding it out, and meaning they're not even married. They have all the problems of a married couple with very few of the benefits, and if they have benefits, they feel guilty about them.
Yeah.
So let's talk about. Have you seen couples date and just, man, it's time to cut it off?
Yeah. I think at least for me, it's usually when there's not a real clear direction for the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So it ends up just being a very long dating relationship without a real like moving toward a commitment to
Yeah.
get engaged, to get married, to
Yep.
start a family together. It's just kind of, which I think usually goes to, I think the primary responsibility would be the man lacking that vision.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the story you told with Adrian is a great example of like she wasn't going to sit around for that,
No.
and so she was like, "Hey, if you're not going to pursue me and make this an official relationship,
I'm out."
I'm out, and I'm going to find someone who will."
Yeah.
And that woke you up.
Yeah, it did. Totally did. I was so grateful for that. But so let's talk about the love should glow, not feel like whoa, in the sense that you've been dating for 2 or 3 years. Have you felt like once you cross the line to sexual sin, it's really hard? And I'm not saying it's impossible, because I don't want to create like a doom, like it's impossible. However, but it's really hard to bring the relationship back to a place of purity where there's excitement about being with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think once lines have been crossed, there's a shame that's sort of incorporated. Even if you've experienced forgiveness and you know, hey, we're not doing that again. We have accountability, but then there's a little, I don't know. What I've seen is that there's a struggle for couples to like overlook. I don't know what the right word is for that. I guess overlook, because they now kind of see the person as they would as a married person, and now they're trying to work it out, but they're not married yet. You're in this weird, transactional relationship,
And you've gotten out.
and you've
gotten out. Yeah. You've done everything that a married couple does.
Right.
And you've been together as long as a married couple has.
yes,
When the honeymoon period is over.
right.
And
Okay,
the,
thank you.
whole point.
That's exactly
and
what
the
I'm.
whole point is, once 2-3 years hit, you're supposed to go, well, all right, I guess we're gonna work it out.
Right.
And that's the beauty of marriage.
Right.
Is you go, I don't care how I feel about you or myself or whatever. I'm here to stay, and we're gonna work this out, and I'm gonna learn to enjoy the heck out of you.
Okay. Now maybe this.
And I feel like if you're not married, you kind of go, ooh, all right, I'm gonna go.
No, that's it. I think no, you're right, because at some point no matter how great they are, you're going to
Yeah.
kind of get sick of them at
Yes,
some
at
point,
some
right?
point.
Like they could be amazing. It could be like Mother Teresa
Yes.
and all the things.
Well,
But I think to your
she
point,
was a nun, right?
yeah. Okay, good point.
She,
Right. Okay, good point. All right. That analogy loses. It falls apart.
As
But
kind as Mother Teresa.
yeah, I think it's kind. Right. Yeah. I wouldn't want to marry.
it's
her.
okay. Keep going.
Okay, sorry, you lost my train. Anyway, but I think to what your point is like everybody has like those after 2 or 3 years of dating, it's now like you're married. And if you've already incorporated sex, if you have incorporated sex, you're probably going to go get married.
Yep.
And then that, I don't want to say sex fixes everything. However, it does help. It's a thing, not a main thing.
Yeah.
And it is when you have a holy relationship that God is blessing, and the way that sex draws you in with, you're consummating the marriage, you're looking at the same person. This is God's design for you. God did not design 2 or 3 years of dating. I think I don't know if I don't want to say I can say it like that clearly. Yeah. But it feels like
I think the bigger thing is that even just the way most people think about relationships and, is like, am I still attracted to the person? Rather than are we living on a mission and building something together? So the idea of even just like separating like marriage and having children as like, are you going to have children? Is that, like, do you want a family? And that's like a very modern idea. Whereas like, it was assumed like you're going to get married, you're going to start having children immediately, and you're going to build a family, a household.
Right.
You're going to, be a productive home together that's on a mission together.
Yeah.
And without that, 2 to 3 years where your relationship is essentially just a chore of trying to like make something work without a real direction or purpose sounds miserable.
That's man, you guys put that way better. I should have had.
Did y'all wait to have kids, or you had kids right away after you got married?
I didn't want to have kids until I was a pastor, so we waited a year.
A year? Mm-hmm. Would you say you were still in that honeymoon phase, or you were out of it?
Okay, Adrian probably has a different recollection. I was always in just having a blast. Because it was like the greatest. She was not a big fan of all the traveling. I later found out I felt like we were living on a constant honeymoon because we were in a different city like every week. Yeah. And we were traveling. I was speaking at things and she got to do t-shirt sales. What else would she want? And she did. I found out that she was not a big fan of the t-shirt sales. And
I could have guessed that.
Yeah. I loved it. I was having a blast. But then when I became a pastor, I was like, I feel like, hey, we're at a place financially where we weren't raising support. It was like I have a actual job. And this is something that I'm going to be at for the next 20 to 30, 40 years. And so immediately upon, it was about a year in, that I like, hey, let's start trying for a family.
Okay. So the honeymoon phase ended about the same time that kids came, would you say?
Yeah.
It wasn't before for you?
No, for me it wasn't.
Okay.
I was I was enjoying that. This might have been I had my head in the clouds just living. You know how like there's when a woman comes up, she's like, just don't feel a relational connection. He's like, what are you talking about? We've been like,
yeah, we're good.
Yeah. Like what this is like I thought we were doing great. What are you talking about?
Yep.
And I was a little bit like that in the first couple of years because I was just I was so grateful to be married because I had been single for so long that I was like, this is the best life anyone could ever have. Yeah. Wow. Yep. How amazing is this? Yep. Whereas I think for Adrian, she put a lot of, she was, I was 34, she was 24 on the wedding day. Now she would like to say we were only 9 years and 4 months apart. But I like to point out there was a 10-year gap when I got married. Anyway, she was more like had expectation that it would be like this amazing, like super, like always like feeling all the things. And I was like, this is the best. I have my best friend. I'm hanging out with her every day. We get to do fun things all the time. Every night's date night. How awesome is this? Yep. Anyway, it's just different expectations for the age gap, I think, provided that. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know where we're going with all that, but but I enjoyed it. Yeah. So, what about you? When did you guys have?
Yeah, I feel like for me, the honeymoon period wasn't over until we had kids.
Oh yeah.
And so it came at the same time.
Yeah.
And so there's this recognition of just like, oh man, this is the first time I'm feeling this kind of way about my spouse, and there's a kid in the mix, right? And so that's like something, I think that's beautiful, because it's kind of wild how God designed it. Like I remember going like, well, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I've got a wife and I've got a kid, and I don't care how I feel.
Yeah.
My feelings will learn to follow the reality that needs to happen.
I love that.
And they did.
Yeah.
And they absolutely did. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I remember, what's that dude who turned into a chick, the famous athlete?
Caitlyn Jenner.
Right. What's his name?
Bruce Jenner.
Bruce Jenner, right. He said something about like, oh, like I didn't come out for so long because I had a wife and kids. And it's like, what do you know? Like the family unit
meant something,
even though you're not a Christian, and it was good pressure on you as a man.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean?
I love the way you put that.
But when you're not a Christian, it's all the,
whatever.
It's what, right. So anyways.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? When did you guys start having children? Was it, a couple years?
We got, right around 1 year for us is when
it was about 1 year. Yeah.
Got pregnant with Owen. And so she was like 22 and I was like 26, I think. So got started early and it's been great.
It has been great.
Nice.
All right. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you got any questions, text them in at 737-231-0605 or go to pastorplek.com and leave a note for us there. We'd love to hear from you. We're talking currently on the Song of Solomon. We're talking sex. We're talking relationships. We're talking marriage. If you want to join in that conversation, we would love to answer your question. Thanks so much for watching. From our house to yours. Have an awesome week of worship.